Okay, think about this for a second. Have you ever felt that little bit of friction trying to join a new group, maybe a hobby or a
Yeah.
professional thing, even a fandom online?
Hmm.
That feeling where the door just seems, well, not quite wide open.
Yeah, I know that feeling.
Or maybe you're on the other side, you're deep into a community you love, and you see new people coming in, you start wondering, is the thing that made this special kind of fading?
Right, that worry about dilution.
Exactly, that tension,
Right.
that push and pull between welcoming people and, well, needing to protect something. It's absolutely everywhere.
It really is. Online forums, academic circles,
Even just in our own interests, right?
totally.
So today, we're doing a deep dive into two really dynamic and often, let's face it, conflicting ideas: gatekeeping and inclusivity.
Hmm.
We're going to properly unpack what each one actually means, look at the real benefits they can offer, dig into why they clash so often.
Which they definitely do.
Oh, yeah. And maybe most importantly, try to figure out how we navigate this whole complex thing to build, healthier, more vibrant spaces for everyone.
That's the goal.
Our mission for you today, really, is to pull out the key nuggets of knowledge from the sources we've looked at, give you a shortcut to getting properly informed on this, because it's nuanced.
Very nuanced.
We want you to walk away with maybe some surprising facts and just a clearer picture of how these forces really shape our communities and even our own identities.
It's fascinating because, like you said, these aren't simple good or bad things, are they?
Not at all.
Both gatekeeping and inclusivity, they actually serve really vital functions, just in different ways, in
Yeah.
different contexts.
That's such a critical starting point. Okay, so let's begin with gatekeeping. Let's get clear on what that actually involves.
Right.
At its core, our sources define it as basically regulating access. Access to a community or maybe knowledge or even an identity. And it's often done through, certain standards or norms or specific criteria you have to meet. Think of it literally like someone guarding a gate.
Yeah, the name fits. And when gatekeeping is done thoughtfully, the benefits can be pretty significant.
Okay, like what?
Well, it preserves integrity, depth. By making sure people joining have some level of understanding or maybe respect for the space,
Right,
it protects complexity.
right.
It kind of deters that really surface-level engagement or even exploitation.
Okay, that makes sense. Keep things from getting shallow.
Exactly. And some studies we looked at suggest that communities with, well, maybe initially well-defined entry points, though they might evolve later, often sustain higher levels of real engagement and innovation, too.
Oh, interesting, because there's a baseline.
Precisely because there's a baseline understanding everyone shares.
That's a powerful point about innovation. And it's not just depth, is it? Good gatekeeping, it can also be crucial for, say, minority groups or niche communities.
Absolutely. Helping them maintain cultural boundaries, maybe guard against dilution or even commercial exploitation.
Yeah, you see that happen.
Plus, it can actually filter out harmful behavior. Enforcing norms can stop trolls or opportunists or people acting in bad faith from just taking over.
Ruining it for everyone else.
Right. And then there's the shared language, the shared values it can build.
Yeah.
That creates group identity, camaraderie, through what our sources call earned membership.
Earned membership. Okay, let's unpack that. Have you ever been part of something where you felt that real sense of belonging, but only after you put in the time? Like maybe finally getting all the inside jokes and the deep history of a specific fandom. I don't know, maybe a show like Quantum Leap. That feeling like, okay, I've earned my stripes here. Does that resonate?
That's a perfect example, yeah. That feeling of having earned your place. That's definitely the positive side of gatekeeping in action.
Okay.
So if gatekeeping in that sense is the guardian, then inclusivity, well, that's the welcoming embrace.
And what a powerful embrace it can be. So how do our sources define inclusivity? What are its core benefits?
So inclusivity is defined pretty much as the act of welcoming a wider range of people and perspectives into a space or a field or an identity.
Okay, wider range.
And its benefits are just as transformative, really. It inherently encourages diversity of thought. That's a big one.
How so?
Well, it allows new voices to genuinely enrich the conversation. They bring fresh perspectives, different backgrounds, new experiences.
Right, like thinking about that Quantum Leap forum again.
Yeah.
Maybe new fans, younger fans, they come in with totally fresh takes on old episodes.
Exactly. Sparking discussions the longtime fans hadn't even thought of.
Yeah.
And that naturally fosters empathy, growth. It promotes openness and a real evolution of ideas because the space feels safer for people who might have felt excluded before or intimidated.
And it's crucial for breaking down those sometimes artificial barriers, isn't it? Inclusivity helps dismantle elitism, maybe privilege, or even those gatekeeping practices that were based on stuff that's just arbitrary now, or outdated, or discriminatory.
Absolutely. And ultimately, it keeps spaces vibrant,
Yeah.
relevant. Communities get stronger when they adapt, when they stay accessible to newcomers, to younger generations.
Yeah, they don't just become fossils.
Right. And what I find particularly fascinating from the sources here is how inclusivity isn't just about, counting heads. It's about the quality of engagement it can foster,
Ah, okay.
promoting that constant evolution of ideas,
Yeah.
and actively working to make spaces truly safer for diverse voices.
So the real friction point then, the clash, it often happens because the best intentions of both sides just run into each other.
Pretty much. It's a fundamental paradox in many ways.
Here's where it gets really interesting. And yeah, often messy. It's not always obvious who's right or wrong, is it?
Not at all.
Like, take that core conflict, standards versus openness. Gatekeeping's concern is often, hey, not everyone should just jump in and have a say unless they've earned it.
Right. Put in the work.
But inclusivity pushes back, saying, well, hang on, those rigid standards exclude people who could actually contribute something meaningful, maybe in ways you haven't thought of.
It's a total tug of war.
Totally.
Then you've got the cultural protection angle. Gatekeeping worries about this tradition or this identity getting diluted or misunderstood by outsiders.
Yeah, they don't get it.
While inclusivity might counter with, look, it's not yours to hoard. Others can engage respectfully, maybe even help it grow.
That's a tough one.
It is. And it plays out in quality control, too. Gatekeeping fears that, letting everyone in just turns this into fluff.
Lowers the standard.
Versus inclusivity's point that quality isn't always tied to status or background. Often, those barriers just reinforce inequality and stifle real talent.
And a huge one, especially now online, is language and identity, right?
Oh, definitely.
Gatekeeping might argue, look, you can't call yourself X unless you meet these specific, established criteria.
A checklist.
Yeah. But inclusivity stresses that identities and communities, they're dynamic. They evolve. What counts as real can, and maybe should, become more inclusive over time.
And these aren't just theories, right?
Hmm?
Our sources show this playing out all the time.
Yeah. Give us some examples.
Well, think about music.
Hmm.
Critics historically gatekeeping genres like jazz or punk, accusing new artists or fans of not being authentic.
Right. That's not real punk.
Exactly. But in doing so, they alienate whole generations who discovered it differently. Or academic spaces, you have credentialed experts guarding against misinformation, which is important.
Sure.
But that same guarding can sometimes discourage self-taught learners, autodidacts, or marginalized voices from different backgrounds who don't have the official piece of paper.
Fandoms, too, as you mentioned. That's a classic battleground. Like,
Wow.
maybe longtime Quantum Leap fans resenting casual newcomers for ruining the vibe or not getting the deep lore.
While the new fans just feel shut out. Attacked, even.
Yeah. And then there's the really complex area of identity-based communities.
Right.
Where maybe some groups feel the need to gatekeep who gets to claim an identity to protect it. But that can sometimes lead to, infighting or policing each other within the group. It gets complicated fast.
Very fast.
Okay. So we've looked at the positives, the good intentions behind both. But like anything powerful, too much can definitely turn, toxic.
Absolutely.
Let's get into that. What happens when gatekeeping crosses that line? When does it become harmful?
Okay, when it crosses the line, it often morphs into elitism over actual expertise.
How do you mean?
Like favoring status or pedigree where someone went to school, maybe over what they actually know or can do.
Right. Ignoring grassroots experience because it doesn't have the fancy label.
Exactly. And it gets toxic when it starts stifling growth or just entry altogether. If the bar is set impossibly high or it's super vague what the rules even are, newcomers just can't participate. The space stagnates. It becomes exclusive in a bad way. Like imagine someone getting shamed for asking a basic question in a gaming forum.
Ugh. Yeah. That just drives people away, doesn't it? It achieves nothing good.
Precisely. And then there's cultural policing. That's when gatekeeping turns really toxic. It becomes about patrolling identity.
How so?
Telling people they're not really part of a group because they don't tick some arbitrary box.
Yeah.
You're not a real fan if you didn't watch it back in the day. Or you can't understand this experience unless you grew up exactly like this.
That kind of purity test stuff.
Exactly. And that's often when it's actually being weaponized. For power. Maintaining control or status by deliberately keeping others out.
Like senior creatives maybe refusing to acknowledge new talent because they feel threatened.
That's a classic example, and maybe the most frustrating. Gatekeeping just for the sake of it.
Huh.
Just upholding old rules because that's how we've always done it, even when those rules actively block progress or needing change.
Okay, so that's toxic gatekeeping, but inclusivity can go wrong too, right? It's not always perfect.
No, definitely not. Inclusivity can become ineffective or even harmful when taken to an extreme.
Okay.
One way is through dilution of purpose. If being inclusive means abandoning the core values or the actual focus of the group,
Uh-huh.
the community can just lose its coherence, its reason for being. Imagine that specialized quantum leap lore forum becoming so broad it's just another generic TV chat room.
Yeah.
Its unique value is
It's
gone.
meaningless.
Then there's overcorrection, or what some sources call tiptoeing.
Tiptoeing.
Yeah, like trying so hard to include absolutely everyone and offend no one that people start avoiding any meaningful critique or healthy disagreement. It creates a really shallow environment.
Like a writing group where nobody gives real feedback because they don't want to hurt feelings.
Exactly that, which helps no one improve.
Okay, what else?
There's identity inflation, where labels become so broad, so easily claimed by anyone with maybe no real connection,
Yeah.
that it feels like erasure to the people who fought to build and protect that identity. Like people casually adopting complex cultural labels without understanding the history, which can overshadow the real struggles tied to them.
I can see how that would feel like erasure. And then there's the optics over outcomes thing.
Ah, yes. Centering inclusion over actual action. It looks inclusive on the surface, but doesn't actually help the people it claims to support.
Like the corporate rainbow washing during Pride Month?
That's the classic example. Looks good, maybe sells products, but doesn't translate to real support. Sometimes even funds the opposite.
Wow.
And maybe the trickiest one is the paradox of tolerance.
Paradox of tolerance.
Yeah. Absolute, unconditional inclusivity can end up inviting people who actively want to undermine the inclusive space itself. Like letting hateful or disruptive people into a community meant to protect marginalized groups just because everyone deserves a voice. That can swiftly destroy the very safety it was trying to create. It unravels the whole purpose.
Right. That makes sense. So if both extremes are problematic, where's the balance? What's the sweet spot? Our sources seem to point towards this idea, this model called low barrier to entry, high ceiling for skill expression.
Yes, this is a really insightful framework, and it comes up again and again as a hallmark of a healthy, thriving ecosystem. Doesn't matter if it's a creative community, an educational program, game design, even workplaces.
Okay, break it down. Why low barrier?
A low barrier makes a space welcoming, accessible, sustainable. It encourages people to just try things out because they don't feel intimidated.
Right, easy to get in the door.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It fosters diversity because people from all walks of life can participate.
Yeah.
And it keeps the space alive with new energy, new curiosity. For that Quantum Leap forum, maybe it just means a simple sign-up, clear rules, maybe a dedicated new fan section with FAQs, easy stuff.
Makes sense. Like a classic game, maybe chess. The rules are super simple, right? Anyone can learn in minutes, low barrier. But the strategy, the depth, the mastery takes a lifetime. That's the high ceiling.
Perfect example. Or a coding bootcamp, starting with basic HTML, easy entry,
Right.
but scaling up to really complex algorithms for those who stick with it.
Or that quantum leap fandom, where new fans get pointed to resources, drawn into discussions, not just shot down for asking about, I don't know, the evil leaper arcs.
Exactly. Welcomed, not ridiculed.
Yeah.
And that high ceiling is just as vital.
Why?
It gives the space depth, longevity, its unique identity. It rewards dedication, keeps the experts engaged, because there's always more to learn, more to achieve.
Stops things getting boring for the old hands.
Right. It prevents stagnation. It ensures the masters, the experts, can keep innovating and crucially mentoring others.
The mentorship part.
Yeah. Think about music scenes with open mics for beginners, but also platforms pushing really experimental artists. Or a martial arts dojo teaching white belts basics while pushing black belts towards real mastery.
Okay.
If you connect it to the bigger picture, this model ensures pretty much anyone can walk in the door, but achieving mastery takes real effort.
Right.
And that's key for sustained growth and for the space having real meaning. It neatly sidesteps the pitfalls of both pure elitism and, well, meaningless shallowness.
Okay, so low barrier, high ceiling. It sounds almost perfect, like the ideal solution. But I guess even this model isn't totally foolproof. There are still nuances, complications.
Oh, absolutely not foolproof. No. For instance, if you lower that barrier too much, you risk real dilution, devaluation even.
How so?
If there's just a flood of low-effort stuff, it can genuinely drown out the deeper, more expert contributions. Makes it hard to find the quality.
Like those big open art platforms online where sometimes amazing professional work gets lost in a sea of, well, less polished stuff.
Exactly. That creates that constant tension between making things accessible and maintaining some kind of quality control.
And what about the experts? The veterans?
Well, there's the emotional labor aspect. Open access could put a real burden on the experienced members, the moderators. They end up constantly having to onboard newcomers.
Yeah, maybe they just want to enjoy the hobby, not be teachers 24/7.
Right. Not everyone signed up for that.
Yeah.
Then you have the risk of exploitation by bad actors. Yeah. Or trend chasers. People who jump into a community, maybe an activist cause, just for the clout. Without contributing anything real, they just abuse the openness.
Yeah. Okay. What else?
Particularly in cultural or identity-based spaces, open entry without context can lead to, well, cultural misappropriation or a real loss of identity.
Like sacred symbols just becoming fashion trends.
Exactly. With zero understanding of the history or meaning. That feels like theft, not appreciation. And we have to remember, sometimes gatekeeping is necessary.
Right. Not all barriers are bad.
No.
Right.
Some ensure safety, maintain crucial standards. Think about therapists, doctors. You need formal qualifications there. That's earned responsibility, not unfair exclusion.
A good point.
And finally, a really sharp critique from the sources is that even with open entry, that high ceiling, it can still unconsciously favor the privileged.
How?
Well, learning open source software might be free, cost-wise, but actually mastering it, that takes time, energy, resources, things many people just don't have because of their life circumstances.
So the playing field isn't truly level, even if the door is open.
Precisely. The appearance of fairness versus the reality of very different starting points.
Wow. Okay, so what does all this mean for us? For the communities we care about? How we participate really boils down to that big question, doesn't it? How do we foster real inclusion without sacrificing the very things that make a community special, meaningful?
That really is the million-dollar question. And yeah, there's no single magic formula you can just plug in.
Right.
Instead, our sources talk about it more like a dynamic sweet spot, something you have to actively manage through the structure you set up, the culture you foster, the intentions you have. It's like tending a garden, a living ecosystem.
Okay, like tending a garden. What are some principles for that?
Well, one idea is dynamic barriers, not static ones.
Dynamic barriers.
It's like progressive entry paths. Access might be open initially, but real influence. That's earned over time through contribution. Wikipedia is a decent example.
How so?
Anyone can edit, right? Low barrier.
Yeah.
But experienced editors gradually gain more authority, more tools, more, say, over core content. Influence is earned.
I like that. Influence earned. It connects to another principle you mentioned, right? Gatekeeping by contribution, not identity.
Exactly. Let people prove their value through what they do, how they engage, the respect they show, not just based on their background or credentials.
So good gatekeeping is like, show us your work, contribute.
While bad gatekeeping is, you don't belong because you didn't go to the right school or you haven't been here long enough.
Right. And clear cultural norms are key too, you said.
Absolutely essential. Inclusivity actually thrives when there are defined, fairly enforced boundaries. Think clear codes of conduct, good moderation. Inclusivity with boundaries isn't exclusion, it's just good structure. It tells people how to participate constructively.
Makes sense. Structure, not chaos.
Another big one is fostering mentorship over just policing. Empower the experienced members to guide newcomers, rather than just guard the gates against them. Make mentoring a positive choice people opt into, not a chore. Teach the culture, don't just weaponize it to smack down newbies.
Yeah, guide, don't guard. I like that.
And finally, maybe think about tiered systems. Designing spaces with different layers. Yeah, create onboarding tracks, maybe achievement levels that grow with the user, like a video game or an online course. Easy to start, but with incredible depth if you stick around. Designed for the absolute beginner and the dedicated lifer.
Okay. Thinking about that quantum leap form again, maybe. What stands out to you listening right now about these principles? How might they apply to a community you care about?
It's a good question to reflect on.
So how can you, listening now, actually apply this balance? In your own life, the groups you're in, first step maybe, define your core.
Yeah.
Whether it's community, friends, a work team, ask, what are the absolute non-negotiables here? What are our core values? What's the ceiling, the thing that gives this space its depth, its unique identity?
Knowing what you're actually trying to protect.
Exactly. That clarifies what needs guarding, if anything.
Then, step 2, lower the barrier, but do it thoughtfully.
Thoughtfully. How?
Don't just fling the door open and yell, "Come on in!" Create actual onboarding experiences. Provide guides, context, maybe patient spaces for learning. You're not just opening the gate. You're actively walking people through it, showing them the ropes.
Being a good host, basically.
Yeah. And critically, check yourself.
Okay.
We all play both roles, right?
Okay.
Gatekeeper sometimes, newcomer other times.
Yeah.
So ask, am I gatekeeping right now out of fear or pride? Or am I just burned out?
Or, on the flip side,
Yeah, am I demanding inclusion somewhere without actually respecting the existing culture, the history of the space I'm trying to enter? That's self-awareness. That's the bridge between knowing these ideas and actually doing them.
that's huge. Self-awareness. Okay, what else?
Foster culture, not just control.
Me.
Encourage shared responsibility. Model respectful disagreement, patient explanation, genuine curiosity about different viewpoints.
Mm.
Gatekeeping, when it's positive, it's strongest when it's cultural. Part of how everyone behaves, not just rules enforced from the top down.
Right, it becomes part of the group's DNA.
Exactly. And finally, think about designing with layers.
Like the tiered system.
Yeah, make spaces that can grow with people. Beginner-friendly outer rings, maybe deeper, richer inner circles for those who invest more. Like that treehouse idea, make sure there's a sturdy ladder everyone can use to climb up. Not just a high wall or a hidden trapdoor.
A ladder, not a wall. I like that visual.
So, as we wrap up this deep dive, the key takeaway maybe is that gatekeeping and inclusivity, they aren't necessarily enemies.
Right?
They're tools, like a door and a welcome mat. They actually work best together when the purpose of the house is clear.
Okay.
Gatekeeping, at its best, asks, what do we really stand for here? What gives this place value? And inclusivity asks, who do we want to welcome in, and how do we help them belong and contribute? Wisdom, maybe, is knowing precisely what you're protecting and what you need to make room for.
You could say maybe a good community is like a well-tended fire.
How so?
Open enough to warm others who come near, but protected enough that a gust of wind or just carelessness doesn't blow it out completely.
That's a great analogy, a well-tended fire.
So here's a final thought for you to mull over. Think about a community you're really part of. Could be a hobby group, your team at work, maybe even your family dynamic. How do these ideas, low barrier, high ceiling, dynamic barriers, how do they apply there? And maybe ask yourself, what's one small, thoughtful step you could take this week? Could you cautiously lower a barrier somewhere? Or maybe reinforce a necessary, purpose-driven boundary? Just one step towards fostering an even healthier, more balanced space for everyone involved.